Still avoiding me?
Still avoiding me? Kendra Locke closed the distance between them in 3 slow steps, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, low enough that only Trayvon Mills could hear it. Quiet enough to cut straight through 7 years of careful silence. Trayvon did not move. He stood with his bid folder tucked under one arm and his eyes fixed somewhere past her shoulder the way a man stands when he has spent a long time practicing how not to react. The elevator doors behind them stayed open, waiting. The lobby of Lock Meridian stretched wide and indifferent around them, full of people who had no idea what those 3 words meant, or why the scar along the inside of his right wrist had given him away before he ever had the chance to walk back out the door. He had told himself she would not recognize him. He had been wrong about that for 7 years. If you're new here, this is the kind of story we tell on this channel. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Trayvon said nothing for a long moment. He shifted the bid folder from one arm to the other, a small mechanical movement that gave his hands something to do while his mind caught up with what had just happened. The elevator doors slid shut behind Kendra without either of them stepping inside, and the hum of the building continued around them as if nothing had changed. "I think you have the wrong person," he said finally. His voice was even the kind of even that takes practice. Kendra looked at him the way someone looks at a locked door they already have the key to. She did not argue. She did not push. She simply let the words settle between them and held his gaze long enough to make clear that she was not confused, not mistaken, and not going anywhere. "The bid review is on the 14th floor," she said. "My assistant will take you up." She turned and walked toward the far corridor, and Trayvon stood in the lobby of Lock Meridian with 7 years of careful distance collapsing around him in the space of about 40 seconds. He had not planned to be here. That was the honest version of the story. Mills' lift and safety had been running on thin margins for the better part of a year. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that would make the evening news, just the slow arithmetic of a small operation where one lost contract could mean 3 men out of work by the end of the month. His foreman, a steady guy named Dale, had flagged the Lock Meridian tender 3 weeks earlier and dropped the printout on Trayvon's desk without a word. Trayvon had left it there for 2 days before picking it up. He had read the company name twice. Then he had set the paper down and gone to make coffee. He went back and picked it up again the next morning. The logic was simple enough. Lock Meridian was renovating 6 towers in the downtown corridor, and the elevator safety contract was worth more than anything Mills' lift and safety had landed in 2 years. It would cover payroll through the winter. It would give Zadie the kind of stability that made a 12-year-old feel like the ground under her was solid. It was work he was qualified for, work his crew was good at, and the only thing standing between him and the application was a name on a building he had spent 7 years avoiding. He had told himself she would not remember him. People who nearly died in car accidents on rain-soaked bridges at midnight did not necessarily carry the face of the stranger who pulled them out. It had been dark. It had been fast. He had left before the ambulance arrived, before anyone could ask his name, before the situation could turn into the kind of thing that followed a man around. He had told himself all of that, and then he had walked through the lobby and seen Mavis Greer behind the front desk, a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she had looked up from her screen and gone very still. Not startled, not confused, still in the particular way of someone who has just placed a face they were not expecting to see again. Trayvon had kept walking, but the stillness in Mavis's expression had already told him something he did not want to know. Royce Denton met him outside the conference room on the 14th floor and made his assessment in about 10 seconds. He was the kind of man who did that quick reads confident conclusions, a handshake that was slightly too firm, in a way that was meant to establish something. He looked at the Mills lift and safety letterhead on the folder, looked at Trayvon and smiled in a way that did not involve his eyes. "Small operation," Royce said, flipping through the first 2 pages of the bid with the energy of someone looking for a reason to stop reading. "We're talking about 6 buildings, 32 elevators. This kind of scope usually goes to firms with a lot more infrastructure behind them." "We've handled larger portfolios," Trayvon said. "The certification history is in Section 3. Royce turned to Section 3, scanned it for about 4 seconds, and closed the folder. "I appreciate you coming in. We'll be in touch." The tone made clear that they would not be in touch. Trayvon took the folder back without expression. This was not the first room where someone had decided what he was capable of before he finished his first sentence, and he had learned a long time ago that pushing back in those rooms rarely changed the outcome. He was already calculating which other contracts he could chase before the end of the quarter when the conference room door opened and Kendra Locke walked in. The room reorganized itself around her in that subtle way rooms do when the person with actual authority arrives. Royce straightened almost imperceptibly. The two associates near the window closed their laptops. Kendra looked at Royce. "Did we make a decision?" "We were just wrapping up," Royce said. "Mills Lift and Safety is a small regional firm. I don't think they're the right fit for—" "Leave the folder," Kendra said, and it took Trayvon a half-second to realize she was talking to him. He set the folder on the table. Kendra picked it up and looked at the cover the way she had not looked at it downstairs in the lobby. In the lobby, she had looked at his wrist. Up here, she was reading his company name with the careful attention of someone building a case. 48 hours, she said. "We have a test scope in the West Tower, 2 elevators, mechanical room, access, full safety audit. If your team's report meets our standards, we'll discuss the full contract." She set the folder back down and looked at Royce with an expression that closed the conversation. "My assistant will send the access credentials this afternoon." Royce said nothing. The associates near the window said nothing. Trayvon picked up his folder and said thank you in the flattest, most professional voice he owned. He drove back across the city with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. The test scope was real work, good work, the kind his crew could do in their sleep, and the full contract behind it was everything the numbers on his desk said he needed. He knew that. He also knew that accepting it meant 48 hours inside a building owned by a woman who had just looked at him like she intended to finish a conversation he had walked away from 7 years ago and never planned to return to. He thought about Zadie. He thought about Dale and the rest of the crew. He thought about the stack of invoices on his desk and the gap between what was owed and what was coming in. Then he thought about the way Kendra's voice had dropped in the lobby, low and certain, aimed directly at him. And he reminded himself that he had made a decision a long time ago. He had gotten Kendra Locke out of a burning car on the Harlan Bridge on a Tuesday night in November, and then he had gotten himself out of everything that came after. He had not signed the papers her company's lawyers brought to his apartment 3 days later. He had not taken the money. He had not called the number on the card. Those lawyers had found him because a traffic camera on the south end of the bridge had caught his license plate as he drove away. He had never seen the footage, but the first thing the man in the suit said when he appeared at Trayvon's door was that they had been able to identify him through the city's bridge monitoring system, and the way he said it made clear it was not meant as a compliment. What Trayvon had done after that was pick up his daughter from his mother's house, drive home, put Zadie to bed, and choose, clearly, deliberately, eyes open, to let it be over. That choice had cost him something. He understood that now better than he had then, but it had also kept Zadie out of something he did not know how to protect her from, and that part he had never second-guessed. He pulled into the parking lot behind his office and sat in the truck for a minute. Then he called Dale and told him to clear the schedule for the next 2 days. The West Tower mechanical room was exactly what Trayvon expected. Aging infrastructure, inconsistent maintenance logs, 3 separate components that had been flagged in internal reports and apparently never followed up on. His crew worked quietly and efficiently the way they always did, and Trayvon moved through the inspection with the focused attention that had made him good at this job. The ability to look at a system and understand not just what it was doing, but what it was about to do. It was on the second day, near the end of the afternoon, that Kendra appeared in the mechanical room doorway. She was not dressed for a mechanical room, heels, a structured jacket, a phone in one hand. But she stood there with the ease of someone who had decided the environment would adjust to her rather than the other way around. "How's it looking?" she asked. "We'll have the preliminary report to you by end of day tomorrow," Trayvon said without looking up from the panel he was documenting. "I'm not asking about the report." He looked up then. She was watching him with that same quality of attention she had used in the lobby patient direct, taking in more than she was letting on. "The system needs work," he said. "There are some things in here that should have been flagged months ago." Kendra nodded slowly. "And the rest of it? The part that isn't about the elevators. Trayvon set down his clipboard. His crew had moved to the far end of the room, doing what good crews do when their boss needs a minute, making themselves busy somewhere else without being asked. "Ms. Locke," he said carefully, "I'm here to do an inspection. Whatever you think you remember." "I don't think I remember," she said. I remember the rain. I remember not being able to get the door open, and then suddenly the door was open. I remember someone telling me to keep breathing, and I remember the voice." She looked at him steadily. "You told me you wouldn't let me die there. Those were the exact words." Trayvon picked his clipboard back up. It gave him somewhere to look. "The preliminary report will be ready by end of day tomorrow," he said again. Kendra held his gaze for another moment, then nodded once, not in agreement, but in the way of someone who has taken note of a position and is already thinking about the next move. She left the doorway. Trayvon stood in the mechanical room with the hum of the building around him and the very clear sense that the 48 hours were not going to go the way he had planned. The preliminary report landed on Kendra's desk at 8:47 the following morning, and it was not the kind of report that allowed for a quiet Friday. Trayvon had documented everything not in the dramatic, accusatory language of someone building a case, but in the flat, precise language of someone who understood systems and what happened when people stopped paying attention to them. Sensor calibration on Elevator 4 had drifted outside safe tolerance. The emergency brake on Elevator 7 had a stress fracture in the secondary housing that did not appear in any maintenance log from the past 14 months. 3 separate warning flags had been entered into the internal system by a junior technician and subsequently marked resolved without any corresponding repair record. The report did not say someone had covered this up. It did not need to. Royce was in Kendra's office within the hour, moving with the energy of a man who had already decided how the conversation was going to go. He set a counter-report on her desk, compiled, he said, by their in-house engineering team, that characterized Trayvon's findings as overstated the product of an outside contractor unfamiliar with the building's specific operational parameters. "He's inflating the risk profile to justify a larger scope of work," Royce said. "It's a standard move for small firms trying to land contracts above their weight class. We see it all the time." Kendra read through his counter-report without responding. It was thorough, well-formatted, and explained away every single item Trayvon had flagged. It also contained no photographs, no raw sensor data, and no explanation for the missing repair records. "The signing ceremony for the Caldwell Group is tomorrow morning," Royce continued. "Shutting down the elevators 24 hours before a $140 million deal closes is not a conversation I want to have with the board." Kendra set the counter-report down. "Get Mills on the phone," she said. "Tell him we're meeting this afternoon." The meeting did not stay quiet for long. Royce had arranged it in the main conference room on the executive floor, which Trayvon understood immediately as a choice. The large table, the high windows, the number of people present, all designed to make a man from a small operation feel like he was arguing uphill. Dale had offered to come, but Trayvon had told him to stay with the crew. He walked in alone with his laptop and a printed copy of the report and sat down across from Royce and 2 members of the facilities team. Royce opened by telling him in measured and professional language that the findings had been reviewed and the risk assessment did not align with the building's internal records. Trayvon pulled up the sensor data on his laptop and turned the screen around. "These are the calibration readings from Elevator 4 over the past 90 days. The threshold for safe operation is clearly marked. You can see where it crossed that threshold 6 weeks ago and never came back." He set a photograph next to the laptop, the stress fracture on the secondary brake housing shot under direct light, so the crack was unmistakable. "And this is not a calibration issue." Royce glanced at the photograph. "Our engineers have reviewed the brake assembly and—" "Your engineers marked it resolved in October," Trayvon said. "I have the original flag entry and the resolution timestamp. There is no corresponding work order. Nothing was fixed." He kept his voice level because he had learned that the moment a man like him raised his voice in a room like this, the conversation stopped being about the evidence. Royce leaned back in his chair with the ease of someone who had decided he was not going to be moved by photographs or timestamps. You came in here with a 2-day inspection, and you're telling us our entire maintenance operation has been falsifying records. You understand how that sounds." Trayvon looked at him directly. 7 years ago, someone in this building decided a safety warning wasn't worth acting on. That night, a woman nearly burned to death on the Harlan Bridge. He spread the photographs across the table. "I'm telling you what I found. What you do with it is your decision, but I'm not changing the report." The room went very still. Kendra, who had been standing near the window with her arms crossed, had not moved since Trayvon said the words, "Harlan Bridge." Something in her expression had shifted in a way that Royce did not appear to notice, but Trayvon felt it from across the room. After Royce and the facilities team filed out, Kendra asked Trayvon to stay. She did not sit down. She stood near the window with the city behind her and looked at him with the expression of someone who had just watched two separate things she thought she understood rearrange themselves into a shape she did not recognize. "The accident on Harlan Bridge," she said. "You knew it was connected to this building." "I suspected," Trayvon said. "I didn't have documentation until I got into your mechanical records." Kendra absorbed that. "Why didn't you say something 7 years ago?" Trayvon closed his laptop. He gave her the honest version because at this point there was not much left to protect. He told her that after the accident, he had intended to report what he knew that a traffic camera on the south end of the bridge had captured his license plate as he drove away, and that 3 days later, 2 men in suits had appeared at his apartment. They were polite. They offered him money and a document that said in careful legal language that the accident had resulted from road conditions and driver error, and that he had no knowledge of any contributing infrastructural factors. He had read it twice and handed it back unsigned. They came back. The second time, the tone was different. They told him that without a signed statement, his own professional history would be subject to scrutiny, that a call from his emergency response days 1 that had not gone cleanly would find its way into the right conversations. He had a daughter who was not yet 5 years old, and a wife who had just told him she was leaving. He was not in a position to absorb what a legal fight with a corporation that size would cost him, so he had made a choice. Not the brave one. The one that kept Zadie fed and housed and out of the crossfire. Kendra listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, the quality of her silence was not the silence of someone processing information, it was the silence of someone sitting with something that hurt. "I didn't know," she said. "I know you didn't," Trayvon said, and he did know that. It was the one thing he had never blamed her for. He was pulling on his jacket to leave when Mavis Greer appeared in the conference room doorway. She had her reading glasses pushed up on her head and the flat expression of someone who had been standing in that hallway long enough to hear most of what had just been said. Trayvon recognized her, the woman from the front desk, the one who had gone still when he walked through the lobby. He understood now why she had looked at him that way. Mavis looked at Kendra rather than Trayvon and spoke in the straightforward tone of someone delivering information rather than making a speech. "I was at Brackenton General the night of the accident. My brother was in cardiac care on the 3rd floor. I was in the waiting room when they brought you in." She looked at Trayvon steadily. "I saw you in the hallway. You sat outside the trauma bay for 2 hours. When the doctor came out and said she was stable, you stood up, put on your jacket, and left without giving your name to anyone." She turned back to Kendra. "I never said anything because it seemed like something he chose for himself. But after what I just heard, I think you needed to know." Trayvon did not confirm or deny it. Mavis had not said it as an accusation. She had said it the way someone offers a piece of evidence they have been holding in safekeeping, waiting for the moment it would actually matter. Kendra looked at him, not with the searching intensity from the lobby or the careful neutrality from the conference room. She looked at him the way a person looks when several things they have been trying to understand for a long time have finally landed in the right order. That evening, Trayvon was unlocking his truck in the parking structure when his phone lit up with a news alert. He did not need to read past the headline. A photograph of himself taken outside the building earlier that day ran alongside a caption naming him as the outside contractor at the center of a dispute over falsified maintenance records, with anonymous sources suggesting his access to the CEO had less to do with professional qualifications and more to do with a prior personal connection. The piece had Royce's fingerprints on every line of it. He put the phone face down on the passenger seat and drove. By the time he got home, Zadie was at the kitchen table doing homework. She looked up when he came in, read whatever was on his face, and looked back down at her notebook. She was 12 and sharp in the way of kids who have learned to read a room by necessity, and she gave him 20 minutes before she came and sat next to him on the couch. "Some kids at school were saying stuff today," she said, "about you being in the news."
What kind of stuff?
Zadie shrugged in the careful way that meant it had not been minor. "That you were in trouble. That you did something wrong." She looked at him directly with the same steady quality his own mother had always had. "Did you?" "No," he said. She nodded slowly. "Okay." Then after a moment, "So what are you going to do?"
Trayvon looked at the wall.
The honest answer was that he was going to do what he had always done. Pull back, protect the perimeter, make sure Zadie didn't get caught in something that wasn't her fight. He had a draft email on his phone withdrawing Mills, lift, and safety from the Lock Meridian contract. He had a contact in Delmore, 2 hours east, who had mentioned work last spring. He had a plan that looked from the outside exactly like the responsible thing. "I haven't decided yet," he said, because that was closer to the truth than he wanted to admit. Zadie went back to her homework. Trayvon sat with his phone in his hand and the draft email waiting, and he thought about how long a person could keep calling retreat by the name of protection before those two things stopped being different. The draft email sat on Trayvon's phone for 2 days. He told himself he was waiting for the right moment, but the truth was simpler. He was waiting to see if Kendra would do what he expected her to do, which was nothing. In his experience, people with enough power to absorb a scandal usually chose absorption over exposure. It was cleaner. It left someone smaller holding the weight. He kept the crew on other jobs. He told Dale the Lock Meridian situation was still in motion. He dropped Zadie at school each morning and picked her up each afternoon, and said nothing about the fact that 2 people had stopped him in the school parking lot to ask if he was the man from the news. On the 3rd morning, he went to the office early, sat at his desk, and finished packing the Lock Meridian files into a box. He printed the withdrawal letter. He was reaching for a pen when his phone rang, a number he did not recognize, but a voice he did. Kendra's voice was quieter than he had heard it before, stripped of the executive register she used in conference rooms. "I need you to come in," she said. "Not for the contract, just come in." He should have said no. He drove in anyway. The Lock Meridian boardroom on the top floor showed him something about the situation the moment he stepped inside. Kendra was seated at the far end of the table alone, which meant the board had already been here and already left, and whatever they had said had left a mark she had not finished processing. A single document sat on the table in front of her, dense with legal language, and a pen lay across it that had not yet been picked up. Trayvon sat down across from her without being asked. "They want me to sign this by end of business today," Kendra said. She did not push the document toward him, but she did not cover it either. It positions the maintenance failures as the result of a subcontractor error that predates my tenure. It names Mills Lift and Safety as the firm that identified the discrepancies, which on paper makes you look like the source of the problem rather than the person who found it. She looked at the page with an expression that lived somewhere between anger and grief. "Royce drafted it. 3 board members have already co-signed the recommendation, and the Caldwell Group signing. It proceeds tomorrow as scheduled," Kendra said. "The elevators stay running. The deal closes. By the time anyone looks closely at the maintenance records, the story will already be that an outside contractor raised concerns that were investigated and found to be overstated." She looked up at him. "You walk away with your reputation damaged and your contract voided, and the building keeps operating with the same systems your report flagged." Trayvon looked at the pen on the table. "Are you going to sign it?" Kendra did not answer immediately. She looked at the document the way someone looks at a door they have been standing in front of for too long. The city stretched behind her through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and in that moment, she looked less like the CEO of anything and more like a person sitting alone with a decision that was going to cost her either way. Her hand moved to the pen. Her fingers closed around it. The boardroom door opened and Mavis Greer stepped inside. She was not carrying anything except a small card, a hospital visitor's pass from Brackenton General, its edges soft with age, the date and ward number still legible after 7 years. She set it on the table beside the document quietly, without ceremony. "I kept it in my desk drawer," Mavis said to Kendra in the tone of someone who had rehearsed nothing. "Maybe because what I saw that night didn't fit anywhere else I had to put it." She looked at the visitor's pass on the table. That man sat outside the trauma bay for 2 hours without giving his name to anyone. He left the moment he knew you were going to be all right. He didn't take anything. He didn't ask for anything. And then your company's lawyers went to his apartment and threatened him until he went quiet on his own. She looked at Kendra steadily. He chose the truth 7 years ago and paid for it alone. I think you already know what you're going to do. Kendra's hand was still on the pen. She looked at the visitor's pass. She looked at the document. Then she set the pen down and pushed the document to one side, and the movement was small and quiet and final in the way that real decisions usually are. The press conference was scheduled for 11 the next morning. Trayvon heard about it from Dale, who had seen the Lock Meridian media advisory on a news aggregator and called while Trayvon was loading equipment into the truck. Trayvon did not go inside when he arrived. He stood near the back of the press area outside the building, close enough to hear the audio feed from the speakers above the entrance, far enough to stay out of frame. Kendra walked to the podium and did not use notes. She told the assembled press that an independent safety audit conducted by Mills Lift and Safety had uncovered a pattern of falsified maintenance records in the Lock Meridian West Tower dating back approximately 18 months. She said the findings were credible, that the elevators in question had been taken offline effective that morning, and that the Caldwell Group signing had been postponed pending a full review. She said that Royce Denton's employment with Lock Meridian had been terminated effective immediately. Before the questions could start, she continued. She said that 7 years ago, a maintenance failure in a Lock Meridian property had contributed to an accident on the Harlan Bridge that nearly killed her. She said the man who pulled her out of the wreckage had never been publicly identified, had refused compensation, had declined to sign a legal agreement the company's attorneys brought to his home, and had been threatened into silence when he would not comply. She said his name was Trayvon Mills, and that the same man who had found her in a burning car on a Tuesday night in November had walked into this building 1 week ago and found the evidence that would prevent another accident from happening to someone else. The cameras moved. Journalists turned to scan the crowd. Trayvon was already moving toward the edge of the press area, the instinct as familiar as breathing. Find the exit, stay out of the frame, let it be someone else's story. He reached the outer barrier and put one hand on it, and stopped. He stood there for a moment with his hand on the barrier and the noise of the press conference behind him, and something that had been a reflex for 7 years met something that had been building for the past week, and the reflex lost. He turned around. Kendra had already found him in the crowd. She stepped away from the podium, came down from the platform, and walked toward him through the press area without appearing to notice or care about the cameras following her. She stopped in front of him, and her voice dropped back to the register she had used in the lobby on the first day. "You already saved me twice," she said. "Let me do this one thing." Trayvon looked at her for a long moment. He thought about Zadie asking him what he was going to do, and about the way he had not been able to answer her honestly, and about the difference between protecting someone and simply refusing to be seen. "Okay," he said. It was not a dramatic word. It was just the true one. The formal contract came through 6 days later, not the original bid scope, but an independent safety certification agreement, giving Mills Lift and Safety authority to conduct quarterly audits across all Lock Meridian properties. It was structured as a professional services contract, reviewed by an outside legal firm, and priced at a rate that reflected the actual value of the work. Trayvon read it twice, had his own lawyer look at it, and signed it on a Tuesday afternoon while Dale leaned in the doorway, pretending not to care about the outcome. Lock Meridian also announced the establishment of a worker protection fund, formally named the Harlan Safety Initiative, designed to provide legal and financial support to contractors and employees who reported safety violations in the building and construction industry. Kendra gave one interview about it to a trade publication and said the fund existed because the people most likely to know when something was wrong were often the people with the least protection when they chose to say so. Mavis Greer, who had spent decades at the front desk watching the company from the ground floor, was named to the fund's advisory board, which was exactly the kind of acknowledgement that did not make headlines, but meant something to the people who understood what it represented. 1 year later, Trayvon pulled into the Lock Meridian parking structure on a Wednesday morning for a quarterly audit. Dale was already there with the crew, running through the equipment checklist with the easy efficiency of a team that knew the building now. Mavis was at the front desk when Trayvon came through the lobby. She handed him his access credentials, told him the South Tower inspection had been moved to 1 o'clock, and he thanked her and walked toward the elevators with the ease of someone who knew where he was going. The elevator was the same glass-walled car where it had started. He stepped inside and the doors began to close, and then a hand came between them, and Kendra stepped in slightly out of breath in the way of someone who had timed it deliberately. They rode up in the comfortable quiet of two people who had run out of things to hide from each other. Near the top floor, Kendra looked at him with the trace of something that was not quite a smile but lived close to it.
Still avoiding me? She asked.
Trayvon looked at her. Outside the glass, the city spread in every direction, the bridge just visible in the distance, the streets below moving with the ordinary urgency of a morning in progress, indifferent to the fact that two people in an elevator were standing close enough that the space between them had become a choice rather than a default. He reached over and took her hand. "No," he said. "I think I'm done with that." The elevator rose. The city held steady below them. And for the first time in 7 years, Trayvon Mills did not look for the exit. There's something worth sitting with in this story. Trayvon spent 7 years calling silence a form of protection, and in some ways it was. He protected Zadie. He kept himself out of a fight he couldn't afford. But somewhere along the way, protection and fear became the same thing, and he stopped being able to tell the difference. A lot of us do that. We pull back and tell ourselves it's wisdom, when really it's just a wound we haven't looked at yet. Kendra had power and still nearly signed her name to a lie because the pressure was real, the cost was real, and the easier thing was right there in front of her. What stopped her wasn't a grand moment of courage. It was one woman who had kept a worn hospital visitor's pass in her desk drawer for 7 years because she knew somehow that the truth would need a witness eventually. Good people sometimes go quiet. That doesn't make them cowards. It makes them human. But the story reminds us that silence has a shelf life, and the truth, when it finally comes out, tends to find the people who were honest enough to hold on to it. If this kind of story stays with you, subscribe to the channel. We share stories about ordinary people navigating extraordinary moments, the kind that don't always make the news, but probably should. We'll see you in the next one.